Hey, what's up? This is Nick with Ultimate Motorcycling, and today I just got done riding the brand new 2022 Yamaha MT-10. Now, you guys are familiar with the MT-10. It is one of Yamaha's favorite sons, and it is their big hyper naked within that lineup, which also includes the MT-03, the MT-07, the MT-09, and MT-09 SP, and this is the big daddy of the bunch, we'll say. Now, a lot of what is in the MT-10 comes from the venerable YZF R1 Superbike, so a lot of this is familiar to you guys. And the thing that is important with the 2022 model in particular is that we're dealing with a handful of refinements to this machine that make it just a little bit easier to ride with additional electronics, smoother fueling, a little bit more comfort, and just overall refined fit and finish. Now, it's not a whole from the ground up revision, but it's something that's, I think really come across quite well at an MSRP of $13,999. So you get a lot of bang for the buck. Now, we are going to get into this first ride review, and I want you guys to stick around. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is, of course, that beautiful 998cc CP4 engine. And as you guys know, it is the crossplane crank. That's what gives it that beautiful sound. Now, some of the new things to the 2022 model specifically is the fact that it now uses a uneven length intake system. And new for this year, these air scoops are actually active. So like on prior models, those were just sort of there for aesthetic purposes. Now the air comes into the airbox through here, and you have these grills that really allow you to get that nice intake howl and really enjoy the motor. And honestly, that's probably one of my favorite things about the MT-10 is just hearing that motor when you whack the throttle on. Just such a visceral and energetic sound that comes to this. I absolutely love that crossplane intake howl and exhaust note as well. Now, one of the other big changes this year is related to Euro 5 compliance, so we're talking about emissions. And the new exhaust system goes from 2 catalyzers up to 4. Now, that does add a little bit of weight, but it's distributed super low. It's actually at the lowest point of the bike, so realistically, that isn't something that I would knock or say that I could actually differentiate, compared to the previous model. Kind of the last engine-related change, and this is more actually, gear ratios. They've actually gone to a slightly longer final drive gear ratio. They've used a 1/2 smaller rear sprocket. Now that's done a couple things. One, it's alleviated some of the fuel economy concerns about this motorcycle. Going back to the previous iteration that had something like 30-mile MPG out of its 4.5 gallon fuel tank. Now Yamaha is claiming that it's bumped up to 36 MPG. So that's definitely improvement, and in our case, that's something that we could lean on in the future. Now, getting into the actual engine feel, what I love about this motor is the fact that it is a very exciting motor, but it's not too overly powerful. Yamaha North America doesn't cite performance numbers exactly, but if you go on the internet, you can go ahead and find numbers from Europe that are probably in that 160 range in terms of horsepower and about 82 something foot-pounds of torque. Realistically, this motor is more than ample for the street. It has plenty of attack, loads of mid-range, and really in that, just like they say, from that 4K to 8K range, that's when you're gonna get the most out of this engine. That's when it really just has a lot of get up and go, and that's something that I really appreciate about this. The MT-10 rolls on the same YZF R1 derived frame and swing arm as before, leaning on athletic superbike geometry numbers to make it a willing dance partner on the winding Blue Ridge Mountain Parkway. What the MT-10 gives up in terms of agility against more racetrack-oriented super naked motorcycles, it more than makes up for with stability and confidence while cornering on the new sticky Bridgestone Battle Axe Hypersport S22 tires, providing excellent grip whether it's damp or dry. Meanwhile, the fully adjustable KYB suspension keeps everything balanced and comfortable whether you're ripping around the canyons or in urban environments. Another big change for the year is its entire electronics package. Now we have 6-axis IMU informing cornering ABS, lean angle detecting traction control, etc., etc. Those are R1 derived electronics, and it's essentially the same package that you'd find on the R1 Superbike. Realistically, You have everything that you get there. So cornering ABS, like I mentioned before, traction control, slide control, engine braking modes, wheelie control, which they call lift. Then you also get 4 different ride modes that are all customizable. So it's more important to understand that you have variable ride modes, 1 through 4, 1 being the most aggressive. And really the big thing for the MT-10 compared to previous generations is just how good the fueling is these days. So that's something that they've really improved upon. And I think that that's a huge step forward for the bike overall. So not only do you get the safety and rider aids, but you also have a really smooth throttle, whether you're in the most aggressive mode 1 or bumping down to level 2, 3, etc., etc. Wrapping up the electronics, traction control and things like that, it's kind of tough to test on the street unless we're in a racetrack scenario. So realistically, I didn't experience any difficulties with TC, and I was glad to have it in some of these kind of sort of slippery, wet sections that we did encounter when we were out exploring the roads around Asheville, North Carolina. The focus here for me is really the fact that you have those aids, they're unintrusive, and as you level them up, go into the more aggressive settings of that, yeah, they will step in as you'd predict. But really, it's that throttle that stands out for me in terms of riding experience. There are a few new electronic features of note here too. The lovely new up-down quickshifter works sweetly, especially when on the gas, and the revised 3-level wheelie control does allow the front to come up enough for a passable Wheelie Wednesday post on Instagram in the lowest settings. It can also be disabled for full hooliganism. But the most interesting new feature is the speed limiter that acts like a pit lane limiter for the road. You can hold the throttle wide open and it will never accelerate beyond the predetermined speed. With the advent of speed cameras in several major markets, many consumers wanted a limiter to ensure that they don't travel too fast through speed traps. Now, moving on to some of the other benefits that we're seeing with the 2022 model, we also have a slightly updated riding position. Now, if you compare this to the previous bike, pretty much the same thing, but they are using a slightly stiffer foam, and it's also about 10 mil higher. Now, they did that to actually just give it a little bit more support for the old derriere. And that's really going to translate when you're, just riding longer distances and things like that. And when you're riding the MT-10, that's something that I think does separate it from the great, super naked herd. Some of the other bikes in the class definitely are a little bit more aggressive. This has a more neutral riding position, but you can still get your elbows out, as you can see in the video. And, we did a full day riding, no worse for wear. And, as a street bike, I think this is pretty spot on in that regard. As we can see, the styling is updated on the 2022 MT-10 model, starting with a newly designed LED headlight and ending with a shortened subframe. All in all, designers are going for a trimmer, fitter MT-10 appearance, and I think they've achieved that. And they've also maintained that bold color palette that is a hallmark of the MT-10 model. Now, one of the styling changes does extend to the rider with a marginally slimmer 4.5 gallon fuel tank shroud, making the inline-four-cylinder powered motorcycle feel slightly narrower. And at 5 foot 10 inches, I have no issues getting my boots on the deck. Kind of one of the last things I want to touch on is the updated Brembo master cylinder here. It is an improvement over the previous generation. We're still using the same braking setup, more or less. You have the Advix 4-piston calipers, 320 millimeter rotors, etc., etc. And you do have that cornering ABS, like I mentioned before, 2 different modes of which. Now, talking about the new master cylinder in particular, brake feel, I would say, is good. However, I would like a little bit more attack, a little bit more bite for my personal interest. Now, I understand that Yamaha is positioning this as a street motorcycle primarily. Now, with its performance, it could definitely go and rip a track day. That's not really its focus. It's a very well-rounded bike in that regard. Loves to ride on the street. You can definitely slap some bags on it, commute to it, kind of do whatever you want. So there is a lot of versatility aimed in that street segment, in my opinion. Now, when we recap the 2022 Yamaha MT-10, you're getting a lot of bike for the money, which comes in at $13,999. The styling's been redone. You're getting electronic aids. You get more engine howl out of that beautiful CP4 engine. It's nice and comfortable, handles incredibly well. You can flip-flop this thing around through any of the twisties and have just a ripping fun time. And of course, you also have that adjustable suspension. Now, that is a lot of bike, especially for a street bike, and that's something that I enjoyed quite a bit today. So that's going to wrap it up here, and if you guys have any questions about the 2022 Yamaha MT-10, go ahead and drop them down below. We'll get you some answers, and the last thing I'll remind you guys is go ahead and be safe out there. Now take care.